So you lost your trust, and you never should have, and you never should have. But don't break your back if you ever see this, but don't answer that. In a bulletproof vest with the windows all closed, I'll be doing my best. I'll see you soon in a telescope.
Costa Rica, one of the most biologically diverse countries, contains beauty found nowhere else in the world. Magnificent ecosystems filled with vibrant colors surround entire mountainsides, supplying invaluable habitats for its abundant population. The tropical rainforests here are among the most productive and dense on the planet. Directly translated into rich coast, this Central American land of splendor boasts more than 500,000 species of plants and animals. This makes up nearly 4% of the species in the entire world. Because people are attracted to Costa Rica's natural wonders, ecotourism plays a major role in its economy. Currently, 25% of the territory is under protection dedicated to preservation and research. But among all this beauty, there lies a threat that potentially affects the entire globe from the tropics to the poles. Deforestation, especially for the purpose of one particular industry, is changing the earth and its climate as we know it. But there is a battle against the climate change taking place right here in Costa Rica. One woman is stepping up to combat devastating effects of deforestation.
We're interested in taking a piece of highly degraded land that's in a very advanced state of erosion and learning how to plant trees that will survive so that we're reforesting both for the sake of wildlife and its diversity and also hopefully for people in the sense that the trees should begin to reestablish nutrient cycling in the soil. So we've worked with land that is at the end of its production. It's not going to produce much anymore.
Teaching since 1972, Professor Lynn Carpenter has inspired her students to help battle this devastating crisis. She purchased 63 acres of destroyed forest near Agua Buena, Costa Rica, for restoration and research. Students contribute by establishing various experiments that explore effective methods of reforestation. From undergrads to PhD students, each individual strives for knowledge through dedication.
One of the big problems that we face on this site is that the soil nutrients are really low, and so fertilizing the soil down here is really just not effective, and it's also not cost effective for the farmers down here. So we wanted to see if there were some ways that we could do it more naturally, and so I started looking into methods of planting particular species of trees that can add nutrients to the soil.
My project on the farm is to determine whether the land was previously farmed with coffee or if it was active pasture and how that affects both insect and tree diversity.
The local people of Agua Buena also understand the significance of reforestation. Because they live here, they have first-hand experience of the consequences of forest degradation.
Para su proyecto, que era reforestación y estudios ambientales, creo que fue muy excelente la parte que ella escogió.
Creo que lo más destructivo es que el cortar los bosques sin ningún planeamiento para eso, porque se hacía por necesidad para abrir el campo para sembrar, para cultivar, para café o para ganado, para lo que fuera.
Sí, es muy importante porque eso viene a darnos una imagen diferente de lo que nosotros hemos pensado toda una vida. En tiempos anteriores nunca pensamos en reforestar, solamente en cortar y y apiar, destrozar todo lo que pudiéramos.
I could see the importance of really tackling the problems of restoration, because so much of our land now is degraded, and sort of the two approaches to conservation are you conserve what's available, what's still around, or you improve degraded land. And so there's a lot more of that. So I thought it was important to get involved with that.
Despite the obvious value of restoration, one specific consumer-based industry remains as one of the leading causes of forest destruction. This industry is based on a single animal and is affecting life across the globe. Cattle ranching. When farmers put too many cattle on the land, cattle can create barren and fruitless wastelands that contribute to the global warming crisis.
So when a piece of land has been overgrazed for long enough, eventually the cattle trails themselves kill all the vegetation. And so the trail is completely bare. It doesn't even have any grass roots or anything under the surface. And this topography is very steep. So what eventually happens is, in the heavy rains, these cattle trails act like chutes. And so they just take they just keep taking more and more soil downhill with them, and cuts the trail deeper and deeper.
Trying to restore these abandoned pastures, they are everywhere down here. Really everywhere you look, you see abandoned pastures. And so the fact that she is, down here getting dirty, planting trees, trying to figure out what works and what is the most efficient and, the best cost-effective and also, ecologically speaking, the best way to help these unproductive pasture lands recover, I think it's really admirable and it's inspiring.
With the destructive nature of cattle ranching in mind, Lynn set out to find a solution to restore ruined land.
I purchased the farm in 1992, and our first experiment was established in 1993.
She initiated her first major project in 1993 called Bloques 93. She tested various trees in different situations to determine their growth over time.
How to grow tropical trees better so that they choke out the pasture grasses quickly.
Dr. Carpenter decided to use Terminalia amazonia, a native Costa Rican tree important to the economy due to its high-quality, workable wood. Terminalia amazonia has the ability to grow in the direct sunlight of open pastures and in acid soils.
And when erosion takes place, that's one of the big effects, is that the soil becomes more acid. So any sort of tree that we began studying needed to be a species that could tolerate both this elevation, which is kind of an intermediate elevation, not the hot lowlands, and it had to be able to grow in acid soil and be able to tolerate the full sunlight of pasture.
With the target tree chosen, the goal was to find out how to grow Terminalia productively. To determine these methods, Dr. Carpenter needed to examine each factor of growth, from the effects of weather to the properties of soil.
We designed a project around 8 experimental treatments involving a question about legumes.
Legumes are plants that have a symbiosis with a special kind of bacteria. This bacteria takes unusable nitrogen from the air and converts it into forms that the trees can use. Dr. Carpenter believes the nitrogen in the soil from the legumes acts like fertilizer, hopefully stimulating growth in the Terminalia trees.
So where you grow certain kinds of legumes, the amount of nitrogen in the soil should increase. So we came up with the hypothesis that if we plant Terminalia and mix in with it planted legumes, that it might help the Terminalia grow better.
The Bloques 93 experiment was broken down into 8 separate treatments. Each treatment tested different factors that potentially affect Terminalia growth. The fertilizer treatment was predicted to grow the fastest and strongest, whereas the control was expected to grow the least. The treatments with legumes were expected to exhibit intermediate growth between the fertilizer and the controlled treatments.
What we actually got was really interesting because in the first 2 years, the fertilizer treatment did in fact grow better, but it lost that advantage after the second year. And in fact, by now, the fertilizer treatment is not doing very well. And so what we found was that when terminalia is mixed with Inga, it can grow really big like this tree here.
Inga edulis, referred to as guava in Costa Rica, is a woody legume tree that enriches soil nitrogen in the areas it lives. Of the 8 treatments Dr. Carpenter tested, terminalia mixed with Inga produced the best results because nitrogen supports terminalia growth. The surprising thing is that terminalia mixed with Inga eventually outgrew the terminalia growth with chemical fertilizer. One hypothesis for this result is that the artificial nutrients present in the chemical fertilizer soon ran out, whereas the Inga constantly releases nitrogen into the soil terminalia can use.
So what we've really learned from this is that 2 species of tree legumes that are native to the New World tropics really can help other species of trees grow, especially if they tend to be nitrogen limited. Finally, we did do tests to really demonstrate that it was nitrogen that helped the terminalias grow better. And what we found after 8 years is that in fact, the amount of soil nitrogen in the Inga treatment has increased, but even more importantly, the amount of nitrogen in the terminalia leaves is much higher. So it's clear that the Ingas are helping the nitrogen nutrition in the target tree.
Understanding that trees may grow better with the aid of legume trees, students set off to scientifically test other methods of tree growth as well as to determine the effects of the existing reforestation experiments.
The soil is just really badly degraded, and so it's really important that we try and find ways to naturally add these nutrients back into the soil so that we can help these degraded, abandoned pastures get back to a healthy, functioning ecosystem.
The day here starts pretty early. We wake up around 6 a.m., get to the farm around 7, and from there I would go out. I have 4 specific sites, and I would measure either insect diversity that day, or tree diversity, or canopy density, and I would go around to the different sites and I'd collect about twice a week. So once I capture them, the insects, I have to take them out of either the pit traps or the planks, and I will take them back to the lab up at the house, and I will analyze them and try to differentiate in between the different ones through morphotypes, and from that I'll be able to plug those numbers into a formula and obtain insect diversity.
2 main field projects that I'm working on are addressing ways of jump-starting the recovery process on really degraded lands. And so there are 2 types of trees that I'm interested in that I've been working with, and we call them nurse trees. And the idea is that by planting these 2 types of trees in the ground and letting them establish that they will help neighboring trees grow. And the way they do this is mainly by improving the soil environment, the soil chemistry. And so the idea is that these 2 trees planted together are improving the soil so that other trees can grow there.
The 2 trees Kristen is using are Inga, the same nitrogen-fixing legume as in Dr. Carpenter's Bloques 93 experiment, and an aluminum hyperaccumulating tree which takes toxic aluminum from the soil and stores it in its bark and leaves.
My main goals are mostly just to find methods to help local farmers, and really beyond just the immediate environment, acid soils are a problem throughout the tropics. And so if we can find a way to alleviate aluminum toxicity, which is a problem in all acid soils, and also increase phosphorus availability and nitrogen availability. So often in these soils there's sort of dual limitation by both nitrogen and phosphorus. if we can find a way to sort of overcome those obstacles, really these methods can be used throughout the tropics.
Because tropical forests are a vital part of the world's health, any technique that can assist in reforestation will help in the fight against climate change. Riley Pratt, another PhD student, is researching the difference mycorrhizal fungi makes in tree growth.
So I have a field experiment here in Costa Rica where I'm sort of asking the question, do plants perform better in the field if you inoculate them initially with mycorrhizae from the site you want to plant on?
Mycorrhizal fungi forms a mutualism with plants where mycorrhizae provides nutrients to the root system. In turn, the plant provides carbon that it produces through photosynthesis to the fungi. Specifically, Riley is attempting to determine if the source of mycorrhizae affects tree growth.
So my prediction was that seedlings would perform better if you used mycorrhizae and inoculum from the actual site where you want to plant versus sort of indiscriminately taking it from the environment, because who knows if those mycorrhizae are going to be sort of well equipped for that degraded habitat.
Currently, the trees have been planted and the first set of measurements will be recorded in 3 months. For now, Riley has a set of predictions.
The prediction is that regardless of where they got the seedlings were planted, that they're going to grow best with mycorrhizae from that site that they're now planted in. What I'm seeing so far is that, first, plants inoculated with mycorrhizae are growing taller and faster than those that didn't receive any mycorrhizae. So that suggests that mycorrhizae is important for at least Inga.
Additionally, some of the treatments consist of microbial communities from different sites. These treatments are tested without the presence of mycorrhizae fungi. His data reveals something interesting.
So what I'm seeing, though, that's sort of interesting is that plants with familiar microbes, a familiar microbial community, the same as the soil type, they're doing worse than those that have a foreign microbial community. Whereas when you take that same microbial community and you put them in an unfamiliar soil type, they're not doing as well. Their metabolism slows down, or they're not able to grow and function as well.
His data suggests that the microbial community from the same site as the tree slows the tree's growth, but a microbial community from a distant site seems to help the tree grow better. Also, the local people are trying to rebuild their community and its environment, doing as much as they can to repair their forests.
Necesitamos restaurar las áreas que se han reforestado, muchas áreas que están destruidas completamente. Y pienso que una de las más importantes es la restauración de los ecosistemas, la restauración de hábitats para vida silvestre es muy importante.
Pero de acuerdo a los estudios de ella y las prácticas y otras relaciones que hemos tenido con otras gentes, hemos venido a hacer conciencia ya de todo el daño que hemos hecho ambientalmente, al mundo, y el daño que nos estamos haciendo nosotros.
Tropical soil is among the least fertile in the world. Most of the nutrients found in the tropics are stored in plants. Decomposition of these plants naturally replenishes soil nutrients, but through deforestation, the trees are taken out of the forests and their nutrients with them. To compound this problem, erosion is much more rapid when there are no roots holding the soil down.
When erosion occurs, it takes off the topsoil. It takes away the topsoil. So it takes away the organic matter. It takes away the biological living aspect of the soil, like mycorrhizal fungi and earthworms and all the other critters in the soil that help recycle nutrients. So that's why eroded areas are really difficult to reforest. If a piece of land has undergone that kind of abuse for long enough, it requires intervention. It's called intervention. So it requires planting of trees.
When forests are degraded, they have the ability to restore themselves, if left alone, through natural succession.
Natural succession is the process of species turnover from the time when a piece of disturbed or bare land is pioneered or colonized by certain kinds of species of plants. Here we're talking mostly trees.
For a habitat to naturally rejuvenate itself and natural succession to occur, first a pioneer species that can survive in deforested areas needs to grow.
Once they change the environment, they offer shade, they begin to break up the soil and make the soil a better texture. They begin to recycle nutrients, so the nutrient status of the soil improves.
Slowly, these pioneer species allow other organisms to survive. After many years, if the area is left alone, the ecosystem provides enough materials and energy for more dependent species to live, such as other plants and even mammals.
And the process continues, not just in the tropics, but anywhere in the world, until you get really a high diverse mix of plant species.
Ideally, the result is an area with high diversity very similar to its original state. But there are many things hindering natural succession. In areas that have been overgrazed, natural succession sometimes cannot occur because even the pioneer species are unable to get established in such harsh conditions.
With degraded land, what happens is that the pasture grasses, even if you just kick the cows off so you don't have any more disturbance, the pasture grasses then just fill in.
Foreign pasture grasses are planted for the cattle to consume because they grow very rapidly. However, these grasses outcompete the native species of plants, preventing their establishment. At this point, the land is stuck in arrested succession, which means the forest cannot rejuvenate itself naturally. Dr. Carpenter struggles to reforest these degraded areas.
How can we jumpstart succession in areas that have been so mismanaged and so overused for so long that natural succession is arrested and isn't going to take place for hundreds of years, maybe even thousands?
In order to restore forest, pasture grasses must be suppressed. This means chopping away the grasses and physically planting trees. But something surprising occurs when a degraded pasture is abandoned for too long without intervention.
One of the treatments that we did in this Bloques 93 experiment was to just leave pieces of land unplanted to see what would happen. And it's really interesting because in most of those parcels, what's happening is the pasture grasses are now gradually being outcompeted by ferns.
Once ferns invade and outcompete the pasture grasses, they produce a net of underground rhizomes.
Because they have below-ground rhizomes that just fill all available space within the soil.
Struggling for a seemingly impossible goal, Lynn, her students, and the Costa Rican residents fight for the future health of the environment. Despite many challenges, they believe in their cause, knowing that they can make a difference.
In the long run, what I hope that I and people like me can accomplish is to actually increase the amount and quality of forest over the world. Somehow achieving that at the same time as improving people's lives.
Es un trabajo de todos. Todos tenemos que poner un poco. Es esencial, es crítico, es esencial. Tenemos que hacer algo. Hay tecnología, hay mucho avance en la ciencia que puede contribuir a eso. Lo que se necesita es voluntad para hacerlo.